Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. This is a scene that I just stamped out, kind of featuring this pseudo Northern Lights sky, I guess you can say. It features probably colors that you wouldn't normally see, but maybe they're kind of more of a, I don't know, kind of a deep space nebula type of color scheme, but I wanted to use the color magenta, so that's kind of what this scene was about. So sometimes you can start a scene around an image, which is probably the most common, but you can also kind of just go with a kind of a color and see what comes about, as far as a composition built around that color scheme. And I was just thinking, I want a lot of that color throughout the scene, so I did something that would represent a reflection of the sky, meaning water, and kind of built the scene accordingly. One of the things I didn't do in this video as I went through the little highlights and things like that was I added a lot of little embellishments, as I usually do with the color box pigment ink and the white gel pen embellishments in the form of highlights on branches and stars in the sky, kind of reflections on the water. But I also have this gold pen, and gold and kind of that crimson, magenta, color scheme look pretty good too. So I'm going to add in a few of these little metallic embellishments. If this was kind of a sunset type of color scheme with more oranges and golds, reds, I might use more of this, like, having it coming out at you. But in this one, I just want a few. It would be something that's fairly subtle. Like if if I just held this out, you wouldn't be able to tell, but it's kind of, if someone gets this, you can see those little, metallic bits kind of catching the light a little bit, as you turn it. So it's those little subtle details that I tend to like in artwork. I mean, when you get a scene, or if you give this to someone, they can, they might look at it from arm's distance and take a look around at, what's kind of going on in it. But it's when they hold this up, and you're kind of creating another layer of I guess visual dialogue, in the form of highlights and reflections. Now we have this element of, you know, uh, shimmering, metallic within the scene. And it creates another texture too, so that's kind of fun to add in there. So anyways, a fairly quick and simple scene, because of the background, the nature of the background in here, just getting this kind of general swatch going and stamping over everything in black. And, where this scene really comes about for me is in the little embellishments like we did, but also in little shadows and things like that that we added in. And you'll see how I do that if you watch this video, with things like the, additional toning with the stylus tool sponge tips and the permanent alcohol-based markers. So anyways, little simple black card here. Be good to do the writing in here with maybe that gold pen, or the white gel pen would look good. And I don't know, quick and easy, and but I think still effective as far as kind of the process goes of scenic stamping. So thanks again for tuning in, and hope you enjoy the scene. Okay, the scene that I'm going to do today, don't have very much of a developed concept, but it's just going to be a scene that's somewhat working around the color of Magenta. I haven't used Magenta in a long time, and I was looking at my pads on my desk and realized I don't even have a Magenta there, so that's probably a pretty good reason why I haven't done anything in that color in quite some time. I used to use it quite a bit when we used to use Marvy pens. This is a shell pink, and I'm just giving a little bit of a base coat to the scene with the shell pink. But Magenta used to be one of 12 Marvy ink pens that I used to use, so there was a lot of magenta background treatments in the scenes. And yeah, I just haven't used them in quite some time. Magenta is a really vibrant color. It's somewhat of a, at least in terms of the Marvy one, really bright. And it can really dominate the color scheme. So if you don't want that, you know, you have to use it somewhat, I don't know if the word is sparsely, but use it with care, I guess. Okay, that was the shell pink. It's not quite shell pink. There was a little bit of color in my tip here, but what it did is it provided base coat for the next color. The next color that I'm using is a pink. Pink in itself from Marvy is quite bright. Layering it down. As I've mentioned in other videos, the Adirondack colors are somewhat thick, so I'm not getting a full saturation of this pink because, you know, the surface is somewhat wet, so it's not penetrating the card quickly. You can see as I add more layers of it here and go over it and over it, slowly the ink from the current color is starting to penetrate both the Ranger Adirondack Lights color and also the paper, so you're seeing more of a true representation of the full value of the pink. And that's the way it'll go for all the colors. The more you layer them and allow them to soak in the paper, the darker they'll become in terms of achieving that full value range. Okay, just like I said, I'm just kind of going for a swatch. It would probably look somewhat like a, I don't know, some form of like a Northern Lights type of thing. Okay, here's the magenta. Layered over that pink, it seems like kind of just a brighter and darker version of it. Or brighter in terms of intensity, not in terms of lightness. And to tell you the truth, I mean, this magenta it's too hot of a color for me, just as is. I mean, unless I'm going for something really quite surreal, you know, in terms of you know, a color of a sky. So what I'll do is I'll be layering some other colors over the top of it. But that's not to say that the magenta will be kind of a lost cause. Any colors that you lay over the top of other transparent colors, the colors underneath will influence what you end up seeing overall. It'll add to the richness of it. Okay, that was the magenta, and I'm going to go in with a number 8 violet. It's a dark purple. You can use purple from any company. Okay. I can see my violet here is starting to degrade the pad. The pad is starting to kind of disintegrate a little bit. and it's not as springy. That being said, that pad's probably, I don't know, maybe between 12 and 15 years old, so I've, you know, we've got a lot of use out of it. It's still working okay. I might get some little of those little, I don't know, not a fuzzball, but like a little piece of that foam, but not a big deal. If it really starts to degrade, you know, get crumbs all over the place, then I'll stop using it. Okay, I'm dragging some of these. I want this to be somewhat irregular. I want some of these flame-looking things to be coming out, so I'm going to be careful not to just tone everything out, okay? Sometimes I have the stylus tool on its edge, you know, a little bit of an angle, so I just get a thinner streak when I want kind of that streakier look. Another color that I like to use sometimes with the color schemes that are really super vibrant and, you know, the colors, you know, are kind of hot in terms of like a fluorescent looking color scheme, is the Marvy number 6 brown. Okay, if, like, for example, I have a scene with some grass and I put in light greens, I don't know, very intense greens, very bright greens. Sometimes it looks too much so. So what I do is I will add some of this brown. I need to find a good tip here. Some of these tips have color on it still. I'll add in some brown, and it just seems to kind of mellow everything out a little bit. It's a warm tone. It still looks rich, but not quite as, you know, electric, you know, in terms of the intensity and almost kind of day glow colors, you know. Okay, so the number 6 brown. It's kind of warming it up a little bit too, you can see. And remember, while Marvy isn't making kind of the dedicated color ink pads, they're making their re-inkers and blank pads that you know, you can make up any color that you want on the pads. You can even mix a couple colors and get some kind of different version of a color. So they should have those re-inkers for quite some time. And with a re-inker and a blank pad, you can, you know, get a lot of use out of you know, a given color. There's a lot more ink in a re-inker than there is in a brand new pad. Okay, that is that. That was the number 6 brown again. This is the number 18 brown. It's a dark brown from Marvy. Let's start focusing on the 4 corners. Okay, I want those 4 corners to be darker to kind of frame off what will be the scene eventually. Really spreads out because of the saturation of color that's on this glossy cardstock. Alright, we're going to have to go to black. Let's apply this. I'm using the same tip there as that brown. You can always work from light to dark and not, really worry about cleaning the tip off during the process. Okay, see that magenta is still in there. It's influencing the overall in terms of the, I don't know, that kind of glow that that we're trying to achieve through the use of layered, what they call analogous colors. It's colors that would be right next to each other on the color wheel. You know, I don't know if that brown's going to be really right next to magenta, but for the most part, we're just kind of working, you know, through lighter, you know, and incrementally darker colors. They're not all the same exact hue, and that's where that kind of glow comes into play. I don't know that the colors are actually really blending on the on this cardstock as much as kind of just layering it over. It's like putting a glaze or something like that. If you put like stained glass or, you know, different colored glasses, you know, together and held them up to the light or something like that, that's kind of the idea you're going for. Alright, that is black. Black looks more black when I really apply it and tap it down in the corner like that, but the thing is I'm kind of blending it out a little bit, so I'm kind of wiping it off somewhat at this stage. I mean, I could wait for this to set up a little bit more and dry, and you know, the surface will be more accepting of, you know, ink, and it'll thus become drier, darker. But I think that's good enough for me right now. Okay, I was going to stamp out this, the old mill. It's 063G. It's one of the first designs that I did for Stampscapes, the line. This is the old mill large, if I didn't mention the large part. Okay, let's just do this in black. We used to get these backgrounds not so much with the stylus tool, but we used to do it with the tonal applicator. For those of you that don't know what tonal applicator is, it's a stamp that looks like a pear. It wouldn't look like this because we're doing wiping with this one, but the tonal applicator is like this pear-shaped stamp made out of dots. The reason why I use that so much is because they didn't really have dye-based ink pads at the time, so we were using a lot of pens, and they didn't have these types of foam tips, so if you wanted to really, you know, ink up a tip, you'd be coloring, you know, a little foam pad like this or something of that sort. There weren't re-inkers or anything, and but the tonal applicator, you can just take a pen and ink up, you know, right onto the design, and then just start applying it into the scene. There's a video on that. Okay, I'm kind of flipping this around. I'm trying to decide which one looks like the top and which one looks like the bottom. If one kind of looks more like the other, you know. I'm thinking, what do I want? I guess I'll make that my sky. Okay, so I'll stamp it out about like so. I have the rubber die is temporarily adhered to the Tsukaneko tack and peel. Okay, this is a large stamp, and this is a very, you know, kind of moist paper, so I'm taking my time with this. I'm really making sure that that ink transfers to the card stock, because when you're stamping wet into wet, it can create kind of a vacuum, and you stamp into it and you pull it off, and it, you know, the ink comes right off with it because it didn't transfer over to the paper. Okay. All right, now that we have our composition stamped out, I can see where some things, where some elements within the design are. So what I'm going to do, let's see, is that the black? Where's the black that I was just using? Okay, that's probably it. I'm going to go into the scene now and try to add some volume into the scene through the use of shadows. Alright, so down here I can see where the water's edge is, and I want that to transition kind of nice and gracefully out here. So, tell you what, let's go to that violet again. There's black in this tip right here, but let's put a little more violet in there. And this impression is also kind of wet still, so I'm not going to want to smear that too much, I guess. Alright, so see that water's edge, kind of bringing in, a little bit of shadow along that. That's giving the, it's introducing a little bit of opacity to the objects and kind of visual weight. You're giving objects, it kind of anchors the objects down a little bit visually by giving them shadows. Otherwise it's like, stained glass or something like that, where the light shines right through, what is supposed to represent solid form or opaque form, like rocks, okay? So giving them shadows gives them that visual weight. And adding the shadows, things look a little bit more like volumes than outlines. Alright, now I'm trying to think, do I want to go in there with some color? I'm trying to think of this tip, if I can get in there. Let's take some of that color off and go in. Let's see if we can get some color down. I don't know if I'm really applying color, if I'm so I kind of gave the side of that mill kind of a gray tone, so it looks like the light is coming from above. You see how the side of the mill is also lit up? Let's add a little bit of shadow to that, okay? Okay, there we go. A little bit of shadow on there. Looks like the light is coming from above. And why don't we do the same? It's kind of like dry brushing. This sponge tip is fairly dry, so it's kind of applying a very grayscale layer of color down. And there's a lot of control over it when you do it that way. I'm just kind of tapping in that version of gray onto the scene. Okay. This has been allowed to set up a little bit. Let's add in a little bit more tone. Stamp the scene out in black, so a lot of times it helps to kind of use that same value. Whatever the darkest value of the scene is, I like to frame off a scene with that same hue and value of that hue. In this case it's black, so I just feel it anchors everything down a little bit more. It doesn't look so open. It's kind of framing things off. This is a really simple scene. Maybe we'll do something in the foreground, maybe. But Pretty simple. Alright, you really don't see too much of that magenta anymore. It's in there. You know, this is kind of what the the magenta looks like. You know, you can kind of see it slightly, I don't know if it's a pure form of it, it's overlapping some color, like the shell pink, but... So, realistic colors? Not really. Would you see these colors in nature? Probably somewhere, but, you know, I don't know if you'd see it in a, you know, a landscape like this, but... It doesn't have to be. In other words, you can just kind of, you know, when I'm stamping something, I'm not trying to replicate anything. It's more of just a reference towards something. In this case, it'd be, you know, maybe twilight colors that you might see, but in a Aurora Borealis, Northern Lights type of moment. I'm just going for drama. Okay, let me see. I'm going to do an overhanging branch. It looks kind of bare up there to me. Bare can be okay, but bare purposeful and bare lacking are two different things. This is the hanging branch. Okay. Let's do a few impressions of it. It's like we're looking into the scene underneath a tree of some sort. It'd definitely be a dead tree, or just dormant. Yeah, maybe it's dormant. Okay, kind of both corners. Let's close that off just slightly more. Okay, another little branch right there. Well, it looks okay, I guess. Huh. That is... the reeds right here and the branches up here are just absolutely soaked, because the paper, you know, in the darkest areas has the most amount of ink right now. And I can just see this right down here. Can you see that? It's kind of, see what it's kind of glistening here? That ink is really beaded up. Not beat up, but beaded. There's little you know, little balls of wet ink on those areas right now. So, that being said, alright. Something to be said for a nice quick card, you know, in terms of the start to finish aspect, but I'm going to wait till this dries, and I think it'll, you know, especially those foreground elements, and I think I can come up with a much better card as a result, you know, because I'm going to add in some little flourishes, but right now if I did it, it might be kind of dragging out some of that ink right now, and if I tried to put some like gel pen dot highlights on that right now, it wouldn't apply because it's wet. So let's let this set up and come back to it. Okay, I've given this scene about an hour to set up and dry. Everything looks to be fairly dry. I'm seeing if there's any kind of residual little puddles here. I'm getting a little bit off of some of these areas in the reeds and foreground images, but not too bad. Okay, let's see. Let's add on some additional tones. Let's see what color that is. I'm looking at some La Plume Permanent, some alcohol inks. I'm looking for that that beige that I really liked. Apricot. I want a fairly light tone. Here's the beige. It's really, really light. Alcohol markers do not smear and blend with dye-based inks, so I should be able to just apply this direct. The only time it'll kind of drag something out is if it's wet, but I think we've allowed it to set up long enough where we can go right in with this. Let's add a little bit of warmth to this mill. Kind of dragging off some of that black ink, but not too bad. Sometimes the black ink dries on the surface and it leaves kind of a little bit of a powdery, residue. Which you would never notice unless you were doing something like this, like rubbing across it. Adding some marks down. Some interesting thing here. I feel like I'm dragging off some of that darker pink ink or something like that. Somewhere in there, I don't know why. Maybe it's the magenta or something. Okay, that was beige. It's really, really light in value. I like to work light to dark when it comes to adding some additional tones to the objects within the scene. If it did get too dark, then I can just kind of take another lighter mark and go back and kind of rub some of it off, lift it a little bit. The alcohol inks kind of sit on the surface of the cardstock. Okay, this is an apricot. Now, I mean, this represents probably some time during twilight, maybe after twilight, or just really pre-dawn. But, so you wouldn't see a lot of different colors in the scene under this type of light. But I am going to, just for a little bit of temperature change, for the sake of a temperature change, although it, it's a minor one, I'm just adding a little bit of blue in here. Something like that. It's very subtle. Let's take it into these other areas, just to kind of blend it in a little bit. Maybe I'll add some to the shadows. Okay. Let's see what a little bit of this pigment ink will do to the scene. White pigment ink. I didn't really leave any white of the paper. Everything has a color going across it, so even the lighter areas, it's a tone. So let's see what this will look like. Try to make it as subtle as possible, because this is frost white, so sometimes that doesn't look so good in a scene that didn't retain any of that white of the paper, which would represent kind of white light in a scene. So kind of a white mist would look out of place sometime. It looks a little bit obscured. Let me try to zoom in. See that there? Just going for a little bit of a textural change. little bit of mist rising off the surface of the creek. Why don't we add a little bit around some of these trees, like some light from the background is hitting the trees, or kind of some moisture around it and illuminating it. Subtle, but yeah, I think it looks okay. If I didn't like it, I can, I can take and just kind of almost like erase, like an eraser. I can remove it, or I can remove some of it, and just leave, an even sparser application of it. That's one of the really nice things about, like a pigment ink application. As I tell people, with this type of technique here, a lot of times, I might remove more than I, retain or apply. Because I just keep manipulating it. Once you lay it down, you can kind of take it off a little bit and put a little bit more, just to your liking. See, that's too much. It looks strange, so let's just remove some of it. Like I said, I didn't retain kind of white light anywhere, so... Okay. I don't like it back here. Let's remove that. Let's keep it down by the water. Something like that might be okay. Maybe a little bit too much out here. One of the things, too, is when you spray, or if you spray, spray seal your card, a lot of that will kind of fade into the background, too, so it won't look as it does should you do that, take that step. It's kind of like when you ever do anything in pastels or chalks. If you spray seal it, a lot of those subtle details, especially highlights, tend to disappear. Now this, I can do a light spraying and I'll retain some of it, but inevitably you'll lose some of the kind of the translucent look, and it'll just, be somewhat eradicated. So I always keep that in mind, and I don't know, it's somewhat a part of the technique, you might say. I'll put a little bit more, just knowing that a lot of it will disappear. Maybe not disappear completely, but some of it will, that touch will be, or that look will be obscured. Okay, white gel pen. There's a lot of rocks in here, and I'm going in and highlighting some of the tops, surfaces of the rocks. How many little dots or highlights I put on top of the rock just depends on how lit up that rock is. If it's kind of if it looks like it's in some decent amount of light, I might put a few more little dots. But if it's sitting back in the shadows, I apply less, because there'd be less light hitting them, and thus less of a reflection, of that light. Water is flowing out this way. We can kind of follow the little water pattern in the stamp design and carry that idea out from there. That stamp design ends right here. It's right here to here. And I'm just carrying that idea, following those little stippled dots out. And see, as it gets darker, I kind of space them out a little bit more. throw a few little highlights on a couple of these reeds to kind of pull them out from the background. One of the things about highlights and the pigment ink, kind of disappearing, it gets a little bit more obscured. But one of the things too is when you spray, seal, and coat your cards with an acrylic spray, the darker areas become darker, when it comes to the inks. So, that being said, I don't want to put too many of these little white gel pen dots in these areas because this is going to get really dark in here, and I don't want these to really be popping out of the background too much. I'm kind of tapping with a much lighter tap here for these, if I want like a really delicate, small dot on these branches. And if you have a good gel pen, you can do that. This one happens to be a Uniball Signo, S-I-G-N-O pen. Let's see. I don't know what ball, roller ball size that is. It's usually shown in millimeters, like a 0.7 millimeter or something. Okay. See those little dots hanging, tapped on there. Not over every single branch, but quite a few. But very small ones. Okay, let's add in a couple little stars in the background. I like to add them in the light as well, kind of lit area. Some I make a little bit bigger. And why not have one or two kind of reflected in the water? Okay. A fairly simple card. Basically, an existing swatch of background color laid on, kind of in the spirit of kind of a Northern Lights type of application of, I don't know, these streaks. Just stamping in the imagery in black, going back in, and then kind of fleshing in a lot of the objects within the imagery, rocks, the mill, sides of the creek. We did that with ink, and we did that with the permanent alcohol-based pens in very light values. And then just going in and embellishing a little bit with some opaques and translucents. Translucent in the form of some color box Frostlight pigment ink done in a very, very thin application. And kind of the opaque, little bit of opacity in the form of white dots with the Uniball Signo pen. One of the things too is you can take, I don't know if I did this last, but take a little bit of ink on here, and if you want some of these stars to glow, I've done this in other scenes, but if you haven't seen that, just go ahead and tap over. I like to go over some of the larger little dot stars that I've laid down. And it gives it a little bit of a glowing dot look. You can also do it in like a green, if you want to do some fireflies or something like that. So, anyway, kind of a fun little scene, and a fun way to work, just in terms of Oh, I don't know, just a really basic lighting scheme laid down for you in the background. One of the things is that when you have that kind of established background, you know, when you stamp out your scene, you can't necessarily make this now, oh, you know, I want to make this blue because this color is already laid down in the background, you know. And if we had some of those pinks and magentas already running through the cabin, you know what I mean? You can't really remove it, but I don't know, you can still kind of flesh it in with some other colors. But if I had a, you know, real dark streak of that, you know, magenta and black running through here, you know, that you can't stamp, you know, your image over the top of it and have that be light. So just kind of keep that in mind, you know. This image right here does have the cabin or the mill, and but for the most part, there's a lot of solids in here. We have that tree line in the background, which is fairly solid and will stand up against that type of heavier, kind of swatchy background. So it's good to, you know, use silhouettes with that this type of scene. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed the scene. I wanted to get kind of a shorter one in after that one a couple videos ago that I don't know, it was like a 2-hour one. So fun stuff, and this should be fun to mat up and make into a card format. So thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it.